Thanks everyone, I appreciate the introduction and thanks for listening to the story about to tell in the next 5-10 minutes. Okapi Resources, obviously an ASX listed company, but we're very focused on the uranium space in the US and Canada. I'll go on to explain to you why it's so important to have those assets in North America over the next 2 to 3 years and explain to you the sort of the background and the tailwinds in the uranium space, both globally, but in particular what's happening in the US, which is very interesting. But effectively, we already have a portfolio of very high quality uranium assets in the US. We have some very interesting exploration properties in the Athabasca, and we actually have a gold project in New South Wales, which we're about to start drilling. I joined the company about 6 months ago. My background was in mining private equity, so I've been very focused on building the team, changing out the board, and essentially just setting the strategy of what we want to achieve with Okapi Resources. And I think that's effectively a three-pronged strategy, very focused on developing and de-risking our assets in the US, setting them up to be done properly, very high impact exploration. I think we're going to be very precise and thorough and very much prioritising the targets we're looking for, especially in the Athabasca Basin. And then we'll continue to look at new opportunities. This company has been built over the last 6 to 9 months through doing sensible deals in the uranium space, and we'll continue to do that. Obviously, to achieve that strategy, we need the team. I joined recently. Leonard Math, who's also here as an executive director, is working alongside us. But we also, as you can see on the next slide, you see Leonard there, based in Perth. I'm based in Sydney. We recently brought on Brian Hill as a chairman. He came on a couple of months ago. Very highly credentialed mining executive, ex-COO of Newmont, one of the world's biggest gold companies. So we're actually, pretty excited to have him on board as a non-exec chairman. I recently brought on another fellow called Jim Villeneuve, who I worked with extensively in my time in the US uranium industry. He's very technical focused, has a very deep understanding of ISR projects, particularly in Wyoming, but also in the US in general. So this is the corporate snapshot. Essentially, we have a sort of a market cap of $25 million. Hopefully, I'll explain to you why that makes little sense. And basically, the share register today is predominantly retail based here in Australia. Moving forward, we have set up an OTC listing in the US as our secondary listing. We think that will be a huge opportunity for us with the assets that we have. Explaining uranium to people in the US and what's happening in terms of security of supply going forward there is a very easy story to tell, and we'll be pushing that hard in the coming future. So this is just a generic map of North America, but it shows you where our assets are. Our sort of flagship asset is our Tallassee Projects. We have an existing resource there of 50 million pounds of U3O8. So that's already in the US, a pretty significant resource and one that's going to be strategically interesting. We recently announced that we did expand that to 50 million pounds with the acquisition of the Hanson deposit. We also have our Maybelle Uranium Project, which is also in Colorado in the US. Effectively, we were able to go out there and stake 470 claims, basically picked up another whole uranium district, had an existing 5 million pounds of production on it, potentially heap leach amenable to. We've got our projects in Rattler, which is in Utah. They're effectively on the LaSalle district, which historically has been an important uranium district in the US, only 80 k's away from the White Mesa Mill, which is owned by Energy Fuels, one of the biggest US uranium energy companies. And then again, we've got our Athabasca assets. Look, these are the catalysts. I'll talk about these when I touch on the project individually, but essentially we're going to have a pretty hectic couple of months coming up and sort of a lot of catalysts and news flow over the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, which we'll be getting out to the market. We're working effectively on all these assets at the same time and gearing up, obviously, to do some exploration, hopefully in the Athabasca in the next North American winter. So that's January, February, March next year, 6 months away. I think a lot of you already know the uranium space well, but basically it's been one of the most unloved sectors over the last decade, and when things are unloved, basically no money goes into them, and if no money goes into them, there's actually no exploration done, so there's no new projects. And what that means is going forward there's a huge supply deficit looming, right? The whole uranium industry has largely been held up over the last decade since Fukushima occurred in 2012. But we're coming out that now, and there's obviously a huge amount of catalysts occurring in the uranium space. The tide and the conversation is very much changing in the uranium space. But the most important thing probably for us is what's happening in the US at the moment. So the US still has the world's biggest nuclear reactor fleet, 92 reactors, never been operated better, still accounts for about 20% of all energy consumption in the US. But what didn't seem a problem, but now is a massive problem, is that 50% of that uranium comes in via Russia. And they've actually let their entire domestic production of uranium effectively collapsed to zero over the last 2 decades. So that seemed fine until, as I said, a couple of months ago, and obviously there's been a lot of initiatives and a lot of hearsay about what's going to happen in the US uranium industry. Joe Biden, before the invasion of Ukraine, was already pumping millions of dollars into keeping the US reactor fleet ticking along. And what's happened now is recently announced he's going to pump another $4.3 billion into ensuring that there's a domestic supply of enriched uranium. Now, enriched uranium is the next stage in the process from where the mining occurs. That produces yellow cake. But obviously, if you have domestically sourced enriched uranium, you need domestically sourced yellow cake. And that's where we're sit today. And obviously, something's going to have to change in the US over the coming short period of time, where these US utilities are going to need to source locally based uranium. And we sit pretty perfectly for that. This is a bit of a snapshot of our peer comparison. I think, we've also got a big resource for our size market cap, and I think that's the key point we're trying to get across here. Obviously, not all assets are the same, more advanced, some are more developed. We're obviously based in the US, where our Tallassee project is. Peninsula with their Lance project is also in Wyoming. And then there's other projects we've sort of in Australia and Africa that sort of have big resources, obviously at different grades, particularly the calcrete and the African source projects. So you just need to be careful when comparing apples to apples. But I think, in a sense, this clearly shows that where we sit today makes little sense. This is a good picture of our Tallassee projects. What we have today is in the sort of the blue rectangle, for lack of a better word. We've got a 50 million pound resource there. Very strategically interesting. I think, we obviously have the objective, we're not shy about talking about it, that we want to stitch up the whole district. When previously owned and the one owner had close to 90 million pounds, which is obviously very interesting. And I think the key point is probably shown best on the next slide. One, I probably need to point out that Kipple Creek, an Anglo gold mine, heap leach, been around for decades, isn't too far away. Colorado, at the end of the day, is very much a mining state. But what the key point is, Cyprus in the 70s and 80s here spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and that is no exaggeration. They drilled over 2,000 holes here. There's 350,000 metres of drilling. We're extremely blessed to have most of that information. Cyprus got a full-blown mine permit on the Hanson deposit, which is that deposit there, which you can see because that's where most of the drilling is. That's where the highest grades are. It's where the biggest, thickest part of the mineralisation is. And they were going and putting that in production in 1980 when the uranium price fell away. So we've picked this project up. We're taking it through its technical hurdles at the moment. We've got a state permit to do more work on the project. We're in the process of lodging a permit with the county, and we continue to progress this project. But this is our flagship project, and we're pretty blessed to have it, and we'll continue to push it forward and develop the asset. While quite different, but equally interesting, these are our Athabasca assets. We acquired these projects a little less than 4 months ago and have been working very hard on them. Our sort of key priority targets that we like is our Middle Lake projects, which is out here. It's only 3 k's away from the old Clough Lake mine, which Areva, or Rhino, which they are called today, produce over 70 million pounds over a 2-decade period. So very interesting claim package there. We're also very excited about our Newnham Lake and Perch projects, which are in the northeast of the Athabasca Basin. But sort of the key strategy we had here is that all our projects, as you can see, effectively sit on the fringe of the Athabasca Basin. That allows us to drill through the unconformity into the basement rock, which is where the most recent discoveries have been in the Athabasca, with relatively shallow holes. I'm talking within the first 100 to 200 metres. This is particularly important in the Athabasca when you're talking about drill costs at, $1,000 a metre. So you want to be able to hit that basement rock with relatively shallow holes, and that's what we're blessed to have. We're embarking on a summer field program here, which is more boots on the ground, prioritising the targets. We're in the process of getting prepared to drill here, as I said, in about 6 months' time in the North American winter, when it's actually easier to get out on these projects in the winter. So there'll be a whole lot happening here in the Athabasca. This is the Rattler project we had. This is the one in Utah. This is the LaSalle district. This is essentially completely owned by Energy Fuels. We were fortunate enough to pick up the two sort of claims on the western fringe of the district. We announced some rock chip samples. A couple of weeks ago, we announced the vanadium assays on those rock chip samples. We're talking, percents of vanadium. Vanadium's always been a pretty important byproduct credit in this part of the world. We actually have already logged and received a permit to drill out here at Rattler. Sourcing drill rigs in the US at the moment isn't the easiest. We're sort of working our way through there, but we have the ability to drill here when we see fit, and this is obviously very interesting ground for us. This is our Maybelle project I mentioned. This one's in northwestern Colorado. Basically what we went out and staked was, you can see again, is in the blue. And you can see basically we're able to stitch up nearly the entire districts by just getting geos on the ground, putting effectively old school staking it. So this is sort of, I think, speaks to a little bit of our know-how about uranium in the US. When we announced the deal, what happened was, and we're hoping this would happen, is a lot of people came out and said we have a huge amount of historic information on this project, which we've actually gone out and acquired a very cheap, effective way of getting a huge amount of information, and we're just working our way through that information as we speak. But I think this project will come, when we can sort of get our hands around it and get our teeth in it, will become more and more relevant to us going forward. And I know this seems like a dramatic change in pace, but we actually also have a very interesting gold project here in New South Wales, well, down south in New South Wales. Before I joined, the guys drilled this out last year. They put about 1,200 metres of RC drilling into it. It's called the Enmore Gold Project. It's in the New England Fold Belt, which is only 20 k's away from the Hillgrove mine, which is owned by Red River, which is another ASX listed company. But these guys went out and drilled two drill holes. Well, they drilled 8 or 9 drill holes, but the two main deep ones were drill holes 5 and 6. They drilled them in parallel. And drill hole 6 came back with 174 metres at 1.83 grams. Now, these were done inadvertently sort of down plunge into the mineralisation, so it's not a true width. But anytime you have that level of continuous mineralisation for surface, there's 30 metres at 3 grams in there, which is what interests me. And the last 3 metres are at 8 grams when they pulled up the drill rig. So this is a project that if you put in a standalone company would get a lot of attention. We're actually rolling out a drill rig as we speak. We've got 1,800 metres of diamond drilling planned here over the coming weeks to months, and we're pretty excited about what we think we can show the market this project to be. We're also going to get out there and drill sort of perpendicular to that drill hole 6 that you can see there, but we're also going to show the extent of the mineralisation, hopefully the extent of the mineralisation along strike. There's been RAB drilling done at this Sunnyside fault at surface, but they've drilled the first 20, 30 metres, and the first time someone poked something in underneath it, they were hitting 30 metres at 3 grams. So this deserves a good, decent follow-up, and that's what we're doing. Anyway, thanks, guys. That's the company. We're also extremely busy working on our uranium assets in North America. And if you have any further questions, we're at booth 2. Thank you.